Assalamu alaikum. This is Nur Fatiha Tahiyat, and I welcome you to today's session, which is basically getting started with Azure SQL Database. And this session will be hosted by me, Nur Fatiha Tahiyat, a beta Microsoft Learn student ambassador, and Azmatullah, who is an Alpha Microsoft Learn student ambassador, and we both are undergraduate students from BRAC University, Bangladesh. And again, thank you for joining today's session, and I hope we can move forward. Okay, so why we are all here? We have an agenda, right? So in this session, we are going to see what is Azure SQL, the history or the evaluation of Azure SQL, and the models which are supported by Azure SQL, relational databases, and an overview on Azure SQL database. We will also see a demo by Azmatullah, who will create a SQL database using Azure. And lastly, we will talk about the Microsoft certifications and which certification exam we can take if we attend today's session and some of the paths of MS Learn platform. And we will end this session with an Q&A. Yes. So next slide, please. So as I previously mentioned, I am Noor Fatiha Tahiyat Siam, a beta Microsoft Learn student ambassador and undergraduate student in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at BRAC University. So along with my studies, I work as a research assistant at Bangladesh Extension Education Services, which is a 47-year-old NGO at Bangladesh, and I am a student tutor at BRAC University, where I basically teach about the concepts of Python and basics of it, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So yes, what is the history of Azure SQL? Like, from when did it get started? In 2008, Roy Azure, he announced on Windows Azure and SQL Data Services in a professional developers conference, but it was not when it actually got started. Even before that, tools like CloudDB and Red Dog were there as parts of Azure, Windows Azure and SQL Azure, where this CloudDB, it was used as a part of SQL Azure, and Red Dog, it was a part of Windows Azure. But after a while, when Ray announced the launch of announced the concepts of launching Windows Azure and SQL database services, the whole journey eventually got started. And right after 2 years of that, in 2010, Windows Azure and Azure SQL was actually launched. And after that, in 2012, we got to saw a brand name change. Like, throughout this whole evolution along the way, we can see that it wasn't just about policy and the technology or the new stuff's coming in, but sometimes it was just about the brand name change. Like in 2012, the Azure SQL, it changed its name to Azure SQL Database, where the whole stuff that how the things work got a bit more specified. After that, there was also a major product announcement and changes that significantly altered the landscape. Like in 2013, the Azure virtual machines got launched, where we could uh, do our whole stuff, whole solution making process on using Azure virtual machines. And okay, after that, in 2014, unlike 2012, the brand name was changed. Like Windows Azure, from Windows Azure, the name of the portal got changed into Microsoft Azure, which we use today. And later on in 2015, Azure SQL Database V12 was launched. And uh, this version of V12, it was a huge landmark in the evolution of Azure SQL. Like now, this V12, it was a version of Azure SQL which changed the architecture to provide resilience and performance underneath the covers. That means it uh, it would not disclose the whole process, how the whole thing gets done on cloud. After that, in 2016, Azure SQL Database Elastic Pools was launched. Now, this Elastic Pools, it is a group of database that is managed together and share a common set of resources. Now, Elastic Pools, it provides a cost-effective solution for the software as a service, SaaS, or SaaS application model, since the resources are all shared between the database. There was also another model like as single database model where you have to pay for every single database you create on Azure, but with the database Elastic Pools, you manage all your resources bundled up together, and you can configure the resources based on either on the DTU based purchasing. Here DTU is database transaction unit, and or the vCore based purchasing model. For today's session, we will not dive deeper into the purchasing model and the cost effectiveness or how we can optimize our cost due to time constraint, but you get the idea. And in 2018, the Azure SQL Database Managed Instance was launched. It was a part of the PaaS, Platform as a Service infrastructure. And here it is the best for migration scenarios to the cloud, and it provides fully managed services and capabilities, which basically means that we can optimize all our solution with Azure and we do not have to use our local machines and stuffs like that. And in 2019, we can see a major change like Azure SQL Database Hyperscale got introduced and Azure SQL Database Serverless got introduced along with Azure SQL Instance Pools. So here I would mention a bit about Azure SQL Database Serverless. So the serverless Azure SQL Database Serverless, it's basically a compute tier that automatically scale up or scale down the resources for a given database based on the workload that it gets. What it means that if the workload no longer requires the compute resources of the database, it will become paused, and it only charge for the storage it had to use during the period when the database was active. And after a while, when we use the database again, it gets resumed and the whole database gets available again. So let's move forward. Okay. So Azure ecosystem. To operate the whole things or to make our solutions using Azure, first of all, we need Azure accounts and subscription. So when we have our accounts and subscription, like we can have Visual Studio Enterprise subscription and another subscriptions. So after we have our account, we can we can log into our account and see the Azure portal. So inside the Azure portal, we will have a bunch of Azure marketplaces. Marketplaces where we can build our machine learning models, or we can deploy our web apps, or we can build function apps, or a whole bunch of things which we will see when Azmatullah he will make us okay. He will give us a brief about the Azure marketplaces, and after that, as developers, uh, if we want to build our solutions using Azure APIs and CLIs, Azure also supports that. And after we build our solutions, we get this Azure Resource Manager, ARM, where we can optimize our resources, we can pause it or we can delete our resources, and we can actually customize our stuffs according to us. And we also get Azure monitors, like when we have our big enterprise solutions, and we we can maximize our effectiveness using this Azure monitor. And after that, we have Azure regions and data centers where all our data and all our processes resource groups get stored in different regions all over the world. And lastly, uh, it's last but not the least, we have Azure SLA, which is basically service level agreements, which describe the Microsoft commitments for uptime and connectivity. So it's basically the policies and stuff. Next slide. Okay. So as I have mentioned earlier, this Azure SQL, it supports two kind of models: infrastructure as a service, which we call IaaS, and platform as a service, which we call PaaS. So inside the infrastructure as a service, we use the SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. Uh, for example, there tends to occur scenarios like when someone has an suppose an e-commerce business, um, and suddenly the popularity gets increased, so they need to scale up their business, and for that they can totally migrate to cloud, and from there they will not have the problems like scalability or managing the instances. So for that reason, we can have the infrastructure as a service where we can get the Azure virtual machines. So yes, it's best for a lift and shift of workload requiring 100% of SQL server compatibility and the OS level access. But when we do not have such huge solutions or huge softwares to manage, we can use PaaS, PaaS, which is platform as a service, where we can get Azure SQL managed instance. It's best for modernizing existing apps and basically monitoring the apps. And we can also use Azure SQL Database, which will be later covered by Asmatullah. Next slide, please. Okay. So inside this IaaS infrastructure, this Azure, we get to use our Azure virtual machine, and it will come along on SQL Server and OS Server access. It will also be expansive in case of this SQL and OS version support. And also, we can automate the manageability features for the SQL servers. But when it comes to the PaaS, we can use the managed instances where Azure will manage our resources and instances. Inside that, we can use single instance where SQL Server surface area would be used. A vast majority of people use this single instance service from Azure. It uses native virtual network support, and it's a fully managed service from Azure. After that, we can also have the instance pools, what it is a pre-provision compute resources for migration, and it enables cost efficient migrations and ability to host smaller instances like 2 core, and it's currently in public preview. After that, we could have used single database, which had hyperscale storage up to 100 terabyte, and it is serverless to compute, and it's also fully managed by Azure. Lastly, as I have previously discussed about elastic pools, it is basically resource sharing between multiple database to optimize the price, and it's also simplified. It also shows us a simplified performance in cases of management of multiple databases, and it's also fully managed by Azure. So that was it from my side. Thank you. And I will now would like to invite Azmatullah to continue the whole session. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so hello and good afternoon, everyone. I am Azmatullah, an Alpha student ambassador, currently pursuing my bachelor's in computer science and engineering from Brack University. Apart from that, I'm serving as the publicity coordinator of IEEE Brack University student branch. And also, I'm working as a student tutor at my department where I used to teach database systems, and currently I'm teaching data structures. So before I move on to my next part, which primarily focuses on Azure SQL databases, firstly, I would like to talk about relational databases. So a relational database is actually a collection of data items with predefined relationships between them. These items are organized as a set of tables with columns and rows. Tables are used to hold information about the objects to be represented in the database. Each column in a table holds a certain kind of data, and a field stores the actual value of an attribute. The rows in the table represent a collection of related values of one object or entity. You can see a diagram which clearly depicts what I'm trying to say. Each row in a table could be marked with a unique identifier called a primary key, and rows among multiple tables can be made related using foreign keys. This data can be accessed in many different ways without reorganizing the database tables themselves. So moving on to an example, you can see I have three tables over here, student courses, courses, and students. So you see students has an ID in the left, and on the student courses table, there is also a student ID. So as mentioned previously, the student ID is actually a primary key, which is unique for every single student. You can see Sam has one, Mary has two, and the last person has three. So they are different and they cannot be same. But when it becomes a foreign key in student courses table, you can see the same ID is used multiple times because it does not actually matter when it comes to foreign keys. For the courses, you can see the courses have different IDs. SQL Server is one, ASP.NET is two, MongoDB is three. And similarly, when it is referenced to a different table, it becomes the foreign key. And this, all in all, sums up the relational database example. So now moving on to Azure SQL Databases. Azure SQL Databases is a relational database based on the latest stable version of Microsoft SQL Server Database engine. SQL database is a high-performance, reliable, fully managed, and secure database. You can use it to build data-driven applications and websites in the programming language of your choice without needing to manage infrastructure. So some notable features of Azure SQL Database would be it is actually platform as a service database engine, PaaS that we call for short, and it handles most of the database management functions such as upgrading, patching, backups, and monitoring without user involvement. So SQL database provides 99.99% availability. PaaS capabilities that are built into SQL database enable you to focus on the domain-specific database administration and optimization activities that are critical for your business. SQL database is a fully managed service that has a built-in high availability, backups, and many other common maintenance operations. So Microsoft handles all updates to the SQL and operating system code. You don't have to manage the underlying infrastructure. You can create a highly available and highly performed data storage layer for the applications and solutions in Azure. SQL database can be the right choice for a variety of modern cloud applications because it enables you to process both relational data and non-relational structures, such as graphs, JSON files, spatial files, and XML files. Uh, you can use advanced query processing features such as high performance, in-memory technologies, and intelligent query processing. In fact, the newest capabilities of SQL Server are released first to SQL Database and then to SQL Server itself. You can get the newest SQL Server capabilities with no overhead for updates or upgrades, tested across millions of databases and millions of other resources. So now I would like to present a scenario. I hope I am audible. Managing data is a critical component of any business. Relational databases and specifically Microsoft SQL Server have been among the most common tools for handling that data for decades. If we want to manage our data using the cloud, we can just use the Azure virtual machines to host our own Microsoft SQL Server instances. Sometimes that's the right solution, but Azure offers another way that is often much easier and more cost effective. Azure SQL Databases are PAS as mentioned earlier, meaning less infrastructure and maintenance to manage yourself. To understand the scenario better, let's assume that you are a software development lead at a transportation logistics company named Trust Company. You can see it on the screen. The transportation industry requires tight coordination among everyone involved. That includes your schedulers, your dispatchers, your drivers, and even your customers. Your current process involves piles of paperwork and hours on the phone to coordinate shipments. You find that paperwork is often missing signatures and dispatchers are frequently unavailable. These holdups leave drivers sitting idle. As a result, some important shipments arrive late. So customer satisfaction and repeat business are crucial to your bottom line. So your team has come up with a decision to move from paperwork and paper forms, phone calls, to digital documents and online communication. Going digital will enable everyone to coordinate and track shipment times through their web browser or mobile app or any other external resources. So now you want to quickly prototype something to share with your team. Your prototype will include a database to hold driver, customer, and order information. Your prototype will be on the basis for your production app. So technology choices you make now should carry over to what your team delivers. So now we will learn about how SQL database is more convenient and more cost effective and secure in many ways, and how you can uh, host your relational databases. So at first you need to choose your SQL database. I mean, why would you choose an SQL database? So going back to the scenario, your transportation logistics application requires you to store procedures that run basic create, read, update, and delete operations. You have experience working with SQL Server and relational databases. So now you have two choices. First choices is to host your SQL server on premises. So this is where your IT team runs a small in-house data center to support the finance department and few other teams. You can work with the IT team to host an SQL server deployment in the data center. And your second choice is actually to host the database in the cloud. So Azure SQL database is based on SQL Server, and it provides the relational database functionality you need. So you have just decided to build the app and application, tier your logistics app on Azure. So it makes sense to the host your database there. But there are some other reasons why Azure SQL Database is a smart choice and why it's even easier than using virtual machines. So if you see the picture here, the picture is actually of a house. So I used it to depict an on-premise. So moving on to the next part where I will tell you the reasons why Azure Database is a smart choice. The first reason is convenience. So setting up SQL Server on a virtual machine or on physical hardware requires you to know more about hardware and software requirements. You'll need to understand the latest security best practices and manage operating system and SQL Server patches on a routine basis. You also need to manage backup and data retention. So with Azure SQL Databases, Azure manages the hardware, software, and updates the operating system patches for you. All you specify is the name of your database and a few options. You will have a running SQL database in minutes. You can bring up and tear down Azure SQL Database instances at your convenience. Azure SQL Database comes up fast and is easy to configure. You can focus less on configuring your software and more on making your app great. So the second reason why you should choose Azure SQL Database is the cost. Azure manages things for you. All right. So there are no systems for you to buy. You don't have to provide power, or otherwise you don't even have to maintain. Azure SQL Database has several pricing options. These pricing options enable you to balance performance versus the cost. You can start for just a few dollars a month, and then it can go high as much as you want. So as you know, cloud computing services are pay as you go. So the more you use, the more you pay. And that is the best part. The third reason is the scale. Going back to the scenario of trust transport company, you find that the amount of transportation logistics data you must store doubles every year. So every year as your business progresses, you need to store more and more data. When running on premises, how much expense or how much excess capacity should you plan for? You can already assume that the scale is going to increase every single year. With Azure SQL Database, you can adjust the performance and size of your database on the fly when you need changes. And now, last but not the least, the final reason is security. So Azure SQL Database comes with a firewall that's automatically configured to restrict connections from the internet. You can allow access to specific IP addresses that you trust. Doing so allows you to use, let's say, Visual Studio or SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, or any other tools to manage your SQL database. To summarize, with all the features that I've said, all the advantages I have said, Azure SQL Database, Microsoft Azure manages the hardware, software updates, and operating system patches for you. Microsoft provides buying options to help you get the performance you need at a predictable cost. Azure SQL Database also comes with firewall so that you can control access to your data. Although you don't need to be a database administrator to use Azure SQL Database, there are a few concepts you should understand before you start. So now, uh, let's just jump into creating our first SQL database. But before that, what I would like to show you is that how you can get Microsoft Azure. So there are two options. The first option is if you go to azure.microsoft.com. So you will see that you can start for free over there. Since we are all mostly students over here, so I would recommend taking the student pack, and the links and all the necessary resources will be provided later in the chat box or sent to you via email. When you go to azure.microsoft.com free/students, you will land up in a page like this. You can see there are a little features over here. The benefits that you get is that you can start with $100 Azure credits, and you don't even need a credit card, and you will get a lot of free services. All right. So what can Azure do? You can start building your apps. You can develop your favorite languages and create custom apps. You can also explore AI, work with data sets, and a lot of stuff. Uh, if I show you a few features, here are the services that you get from Azure. So as you can see, you get Azure Virtual Machines Linux for 12 months for free. So all the services shown on the screen are actually free. So you will get Azure Virtual Machines Windows for 12 months. Note that there is hours written over here. So 750 hours is written, which means in 12 months you can use it for 750 hours. If you finish your hour count, then you'll lose access to it. And now our targeted one, which is the Azure SQL Database, which is over here. And there are also other services available. If the link is provided to you, you can check it for yourself. And there are quick guides which you can use, for example, getting started with AI, or introduction to Azure virtual machines, and a lot more. So you can check this out once the links are provided to you. And there is an overview and frequently asked questions which you can check. The second way to get Microsoft Azure, and the recommended way to get Microsoft Azure, is using the GitHub Student Developer Pack. Everyone here is aware of GitHub and what GitHub does. So if you go to education.github.com and you check their Student Developer Pack, you can sign up for a student developer. And the best part is you get around 70 services for free. For free. So this is a big win-win. You can get Canva, you can get domain vouchers, and here is Microsoft Azure. You can get JetBrains for IDs for coding. You have Visual Studio Code, and you have a lot more. So DataCamp, GitLens, GitKraken, and you can check it for yourself in later on. All you have to do is provide a university issued email address. So it is mandatory to provide a university issued email address while signing up with GitHub. You can actually check it, and we will provide all the links regarding all the resources. So now, coming to the demonstration that we're supposed to show, I will jump into Azure Portal. So this is actually the Azure Portal, as you can see on my screen. Since I'm a student ambassador, I have access to Microsoft Azure and a lot of services. Uh, the interface, there is notification. You can check your notifications. You can see I have credits available, $149. So by default, student ambassadors get $150 every month for doing their work. You can also check the portal settings and the subscriptions that you have, your deployed machines, and every single thing required will be available in the dashboard. So as we are more into SQL databases for today, we will look into Azure SQL Databases. So Fatiha, is my portal available? Or Mitul, is my screen available?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, thank you. So there are a lot of ways you can go to your desired service. First is the search bar. You can directly write SQL databases, and then you can see it pop up on the screen. And the second part is, if you have used the service once, then it will by default show up on your screen. So as you can see, it is on recents. And thirdly, there is the hamburger sign. Where you go to hamburger sign, you can see SQL databases or other functions that you want to see. The best part is when you click more services, you can see on the left there are dozens and 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 dozens of services available over here. I may have said it 8 times, but you can picture how much services Microsoft is providing us. So since we are focusing on databases, I'll head over to the database section. And in the database section, you can see all the databases available for in the Microsoft Azure platform. And in the platform, as we are focusing on SQL databases, I'll just go to SQL database. So when I move to SQL database, I would like to show it once again. If I hover over the SQL database, you can see a list of courses and free trainings from Microsoft appear. So there are a lot of benefits that you can get even if you're a beginner. They will teach you from the very beginning of how to work with Azure and its services. So now I will show you how to deploy a SQL database. And for this, I have the create button at the very top left. And when I hit create, it's actually loading. And you can see a screen pops up saying create SQL database. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to select a subscription. So as I mentioned earlier, I am already a student ambassador, so I have a subscription. But when you're signing up for free, you will have something called free trial over here, so you can try it for yourselves. I have to select a resource group. So initially, you will not have a resource group. And let me tell you what a resource group is. A resource group is a container that holds related resources for an Azure solution. The resource group can include all the resources for the solution, uh, or only those resources that you want to manage as a group. So I will create a new resource over here, and the resource name could be something logical. For example, I give SQL Database 02, and if I hit OK, you can see it's written new, and there is written SQL Database 2. So then comes the interesting part, that is the database details. So you can see I do not have a database name, nor do I have a server. So for the database to actually be hosted, I need a server. So first I will create a new server from over here. When I click new server, it wants a server name. So the server name actually has to be unique. So for this, I will go for SQL database -2. So you can see I have got a green check mark, which means this server name is available. But let's just say I hit 1, and you can see I hit 01. So you will see there is a cross sign, which means the specified server name is already in use. So duplicate names cannot be used, all right? So the name has to be unique. And there is a location. So this is the best part about cloud computing. You can launch your resources or your services anywhere across the world. All you have to do is select the destination, and you're good to go. So I would just go with the default one, that is USA East. And then moving on to the authentication part, you have to give an authentication. I said you can access your service using Visual Studio or SSMS. So these will be required while you're trying to authenticate yourself by logging into SSMS for SQL database, for connecting your database. So I would use the default one, and I have to type in an username. For admin, I'll go with, let's just say, admin2, and it is available, and I have to set a password. Note that every single thing you do has a lot of requirements. So for example, if I just type in a normal name, you can see a lot of things pop up, like your password must be at least 8 characters, your password must be not more than 128 characters. So you have to get everything checked. So I will just go with a safe password, and you can see I've got all tick marks, and then I will move to confirm the password, and that's pretty much it. If I hit OK, it will take me to back the create SQL database screen. So I have to enter the database name, and I would go with dbtest02. This name also matters. So as you can see, no database with the same name exists in the server. And now the most important part, if you want to create an elastic pool or not. So as Fatiha mentioned, that there are SQL instances, there are SQL single database and pools. So it actually depends on you, and you can check it up on the internet what SQL elastic pools are. It is important to configure the database. So when I hit configure database, you can see uh, there are the service tier is general purpose, and it is provisioned. So I will be getting up to 80 cores of CPU power. That is quite a lot. and 408 gigs of RAM. And with great power comes great money. You can see it costs around 231.28 US dollars. So I won't be able to pay so much. So I would like lower my scale. I would go to, let's just say, DTO based purchasing model, and I would go for a basic option. So when I hit the basic option, you can see it is the most basic uh, compute engine that you can get. So the cores that you will get is only one, and it gives you a maximum of 2 GB data storage, and it costs only 4.99 US dollars. So this is quite more affordable for the time being. You can check the premium services or the business critical or the hyperscale, whichever you want. So for the simple demonstration and practice, I am just going with a basic plan, and then I hit apply. After I hit apply, I'll just go with the default geo-redundant backup storage, which means the storage will be available in different paired regions. And then I go to networking. I haven't actually set up no access points for the time being because I won't be connecting to Visual Studio, or I won't be connecting to, let's just say, SSMS. So I go with no access. When I move below, I will just stick to the default settings that is over here. And if I go to security, you have to pay extra money to secure to get more security, but for the time being I'm not using security because Azure already provides a default security. For extra security, for like Microsoft Defender for SQL, specifically for it, you can start a free trial if you want. So all the options are left default. And moving to the additional section, I need a data set. You can actually have your own data set, or you can take a default data set that Azure provides you. I am taking a sample dataset which is named AdventureWorks LT that you can see on my screen, and it will by default generate a dataset. So if I move on to tags, there won't be any tags for the time being. And here is the summary. Estimated cost is $4.99. All the information is available here: server admin, storage, backup, server name, location, and everything. So the security, the identity, everything is actually provided here. And all I would do is hit the create button. So as I hit the create button, it usually takes a little time to load because it validates and then it starts running. So you can see in the top right, it says initializing deployment, and it is submitting the deployment. So here in the pop-up screen, you can see deployment is in progress. So it takes like 2 to 4 minutes to deploy depending on the internet speed. We are in Dhaka and it's pretty hot right now, and you know the internet speed, so I don't have to tell you anything. So I was already aware of this, and I had already created uh, a service beforehand. So if I see all my services, I'm not here, sorry. Go to SQL Databases. You can see DB test 1. I actually deployed test 2, which will take a little time. So I'll just go to DB test 1 to do all the work. Here in the notification panel, you can see deployment is in progress, and it will, as I mentioned earlier, it will take some time. But just to walk you through, uh, there are a lot of server checks that are going to go in the backend, and all your resources are going to be allocated. After a few minutes, you will receive confirmation, and once you receive confirmation, all you have to do is just view your resource, and that's pretty much it. So as I mentioned, I had already created a database. uh, this is what the interface looks like when you log in as admin with your ID and password. So you can see 4% of it was used today at 2:51 p.m. Just before the session started. I actually did a test. And moving to the query editor part, I had actually, you can see that there is admin1 over here. So I have to log in. So I have to give the password that I set over here, and I'll just directly log in. Give me a minute. Yeah, so I have logged in. If you're trying to log in and it actually gives you a warning about your IP address, by default there is going to be a URL there which says add IP address, and you can add your IP address. So I'm doing the whole thing in Azure Portal, so this wouldn't be a problem. In the portal you can use Visual Studio or SSMS. So the database that was the sample dataset that was given to us was the Adventure LT, and you can see there are a lot of tables over here. So all we have to do is we have to write our queries and filter the data we need. So fantastic. You can see that the deployment has been successful, and if I jump to the newest deployment, which I will show in a later bit, I'll just walk you through this. So let's just pick a table that says sales lt dot address, and I'll just write an SQL query like select star from sales lt address, and I'll run the query, and you can see the output is shown in the lower part. And here are all the outputs. You can see the address line, the city, the address ID. When I was describing relational databases, I told you about tables, attributes, and other stuff. So I'm pretty sure you remember that one. So if, for instance, I want to know uh, in Bothell city, how many address lines are over there. So I would just head over to my query again, and I would, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to see the address line. So I hit select address line 1 from sales lt dot address. This is the table where city is equal to Bothell. And when I run the query, you can see the output. It only gives me the list of streets available in Portal. So this is how you can launch Azure SQL Database, and you can work, uh, test your data, and you can create more databases, update, delete, all the stuffs that you want to do. So now I would move to my home, and once I hit home, you can see all the it gives you a prompt that to save your changes. Just to give you an overview, the deployment was successful, and when I go to my resource, it's the same thing all over again. When it was deployed, how you will access it, you can get all of it over here. Once you hit query editor, you have to log in. So note that when I give the password, there will be an error. If your IP isn't set over here, you have to set it manually. So that would be it for the demonstration. I hope all of you would try your best to practice with databases. And now moving on to the slides once again. We have successfully covered our demonstration of our first SQL database, where I also showed you how to get Azure for free. And now I will, there are some things that you need to keep in mind. That is, you always, when you are launching a service, it's at $4.99. If you do not actually stop the service, then every month $4.99 will be deducted from your account. So you have to be careful about that one. You have to stop your computing resources, and you have to delete your workspace resources so that it does not uh, cut cost. So one more thing that I would like to say regarding the deletion is that if I go back and if I go to my database test that I launched, you can see there is actually no delete option here, because uh, I mean, for the server, you cannot actually delete the server. You can delete the database, but you won't be able to delete the server. So when I try to delete it, and I have to go with the database name, let's just say db test 02, and if I hit delete, it will just like vanish in 2 minutes. But when it comes to the server, servers cannot be stopped. All right, so databases here, it cannot be stopped. So there is no stop button, as I was talking about. You cannot stop a database. So it is always up and running. So be sure to delete it once you are done using. And then moving to the slides once again. Now is the important part about all our resources that we used. And now another important part is the what can you do in future with Azure SQL and other stuff. So Fatiha and Mitul, is my screen visible of certifications and MS Learn?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so here are a list of certificates and courses that you can get for free. If I move on to MS Learn platform, Microsoft Learn platform is actually a platform where you can get your necessary trainings and a lot of stuff. If I just hit Microsoft Learn, you will see that there is a resource here which says Microsoft Learn box, and once you get into Microsoft Learn, you will get a lot of stuff. You can get courses, you can get learning paths, you can get modules, you can get certifications, trainings, resources, and a lot more stuff. So here are a few courses that I would like to show you. So when I go to browse, you can see there are 4,000 results. So there are a lot of resources for you to run. Since we covered a database today, uh, you can either search as a role-based person, for example, database administrator, scientist, or engineer, or you can also go to search and just write Azure SQL and hit search, and every single resources related to Azure SQL or databases will pop up. So you can use it at your own pace. So one of the important things that was used was the Azure SQL Fundamentals Learning Path. It contains a list of modules. You can see one of the modules is Introduction to SQL, and you will get all the links and resources after the session is over. So this is also one of the parts that you can look. And I mentioned about browsing the courses, so I will directly move to certifications. So what is a certification? Certifications are actually exams, that foundation exams that you give, and after you pass, you get a certificate that will be directly issued by Microsoft. And I highly recommend you to look into certifications if you're planning your career in data science or any other part. They are actually, they add an extra value to your CV. If you have a certification, this means that you are certified by a certain vendor, that you know about a specific skill. So do check out the Azure Data Fundamentals certification, and there are a lot more other resources available that you can also check. So if I move on to one of the resources that I have, uh, regarding exploring Azure database and analytics, like what to do after your Azure SQL database. You can see there are a lot more other options. You have managed instances, you have MySQL, you have PostgreSQL, you have Synapse Analytics, you have HD Insights, you have Databricks, you have Data Lake Analytics. So as I said earlier, if I go to all my services, here are a list of services that you can see, and a lot of the services that you'll get. So there are a lot of resources which we will give it to you, and if you stay connected with us for a longer time for our future sessions that we are going to conduct, then you will get a lot more other stuff. So last but not the least, uh, I would I would move to tell you that we are done with the webinar for today. But before you leave, I have some announcements to make. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar on Azure SQL Databases, the hands-on demonstration, and all the theories that were covered. And I really hope that you will look into it. Both Fatiha and I, we try to cover the basics as much as possible. and we will provide all the resources necessary for you to check out and get your own hands-on experience at home. So apart from this, now we would like to move to the Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, I would request them to actually write it in the chat box, or what you can do is you can unmute yourself. There is a mic option should be available now. You can unmute yourself and you can answer or ask questions regarding the topics. So if anyone has any questions, then kindly I would request all of you to please ask questions or write it in the chat box. So you have access to your microphone, so I believe you will utilize it. Thank you. We will be waiting for a few minutes for the questions. So if anyone has any questions, please ask. Okay, what are some other services related to database in Azure? All right, good question, Mr. Mukit. Thank you. So I would like to go back to my screen. You can see here I have MariaDB servers, I have migration servers, I have Cosmos DB servers, and I also have virtual clusters and SQL virtual machines. So these are some other services that you can use to create your designated or your targeted projects. So you can use Redis, and there's a lot more. And the best part is if you hover over, as I had asked previously, or I had told previously, you can get free trainings from Microsoft. So even if you don't have a single idea about what it is and what to do, there are Microsoft will provide you all the resources needed. So as you can see here, it says work with mutable and partial data in Azure Redis Cache. It is a 1 hour, 5-minute module. And in this 1 hour, 5-minute module, there will be video, there will be resources, there will be practice labs that you can use. For your ease, I will go to the site and show it to you. So it takes me to the Microsoft Learn platform. And there you can see what you will get from this. The objectives like prove multiple operations and transactions and other stuff you get, and what you get in return is that you will be used to Azure Cache for Redis. And you can see there's an exercise like implement data exploration. So this is a sandbox. A sandbox is actually like a virtual timer for you so that you can go and practice, and it gives you access to Azure resources temporarily. And once you are done, then you can go carry on with all your work. So this was one of the questions. Any more questions that uh, anyone else has? So please feel free to ask. Okay, I can see a hand raise. So dear participant, please, you can ask your question or you can put it in the chat box. I request you to put it in the chat box. All right, so I can see the question. It says, how long will the services run? Oh, as I mentioned earlier, it's like 99.99% uptime, so it always keeps running. Just make sure that you stop the instances and you stop the instances, and then you can actually go carry on with all your work. So just make sure that your threads do not end and you are good to go. So if anyone has any more questions, then you can ask, or else we can wrap up the session over here. Okay, how to turn off service. So thank you, Nusrat Fateh Ali, for asking the questions. How to turn off the service, as I had shown earlier. This is actually a database and you cannot turn off the service. You can only turn it off if you go serverless. So once you go serverless, you can ask questions. Once you go serverless, you can stop the service from over there. You will by default have a stop button to stop it. So as I am doing all the works in the portal, there is no there is no uh, stop button over here as I showed. I just deleted the instance so that my balance does not go off or the money I don't have to pay. And lastly, Sharia Al Mustaqim Nitur says, what about MLSA program? Okay, how to apply and what are the benefits? I'm coming to Sharia Al Mustaqim Nitur's question, but before that, will there be any future sessions such as this one? Yes, Mr. Salman, there will be future sessions. So I will answer to Sharia Al Mustaqim Nitur's question, but all I want you to do is fill up this form that is available on the screen. Can anyone please, Mitul or Fatiha, can you please give it in the chat box so that they can fill it up? So as promised to you via email, people who stayed for a longer duration will be getting certificates and other rewards. So please fill up the form and please give constructive feedbacks so that we know how to do great. And now moving on to Sharia al-Mustaqim's Mitul's question, that is my MLSA program. So I will just show you the benefits of Microsoft Learn School Ambassadors. Fatiha, are you there?
Yes, there I am.
If you want, you can tell this part.
You are sharing the screen, so you can go on.
If you want, you can like add something.
Uh,
So
I will.
yes, Fatiha, you can tell them about the program, and I'll just show them on my screen.
Well, you can describe the things, and if I'd like to add something, I will just
Oh,
add.
okay. All right. So Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors, we are basically global campus leaders who do social activities and primarily focused on Microsoft technology. So we have fellow students with their skills, like coding skills, and we guide them with different resources that we have. Microsoft Learn is one of the key resources that we have that I showed you. And apart from that, you can get to attend many events. And the biggest event that happened a few months earlier, that was the Imagine Cup. And you can also participate in future in the Microsoft events and get involved with us. And MS Learn, Microsoft Learn that I have showed you, the most important thing over here. You can get all resources that you want related to Microsoft technology over here. And regarding that, more for the program, there are 4 intakes every year. So 4 cohorts, as we say it. So each year in 4 parts, students get accepted in Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador program. We have like a few milestones that you can see. Uh, One is primarily alpha milestone, beta milestone, and gold milestone. All the benefits related to these are shown on my screen right now. So you can see as alpha ambassador, you get 150 monthly Azure credits, which I showed you. I had 149.99 because I used some. You get Visual Studio Enterprise, exam vouchers, student ambassador email domain. As a beta student ambassador, you get all the alpha benefits, but then you get the swag box. Swag box is actually a souvenir that Microsoft gives to you for your contribution and promotion. You get event support if you're doing it in person, and you get mentorship sessions, and you get access to Ambassador Summit. And lastly, the gold, all above all ambassador position. So once you become gold, you get all alpha and beta benefits, and you get access to special events, program leaderships, and you get invited to Microsoft's most valuable professional mentorship program. So these are like the largest benefits that you get, and you can check out your website, which will be provided in the chat box. So Mitul is there to cover the chat box. So you can get the upcoming events and all the resources here. Okay, the question says, as a beginner, can anyone apply? Yes, anyone can apply who is above 16 and is part of an accredited university. So anyone from any part of the world can apply. And I will share a blog with all of you about how to join Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors program. You can go through it, or you can check out videos that were made by one of our fellow student ambassadors uh, in his YouTube channel, Learn with Mithul. He has all the resources provided there. Also, we have a GitHub repository where you can get uh, resources related to like certifications and all the Microsoft materials that you want. So all of this Microsoft has made it free for student ambassadors. It is exclusive and we get additional benefits. So that would be all. And in July we have another cohort coming up. So if you want to apply in July cohort, then definitely check it out. The applications will end in sometime in June or maybe in May. I'm not sure about that one, but the application will end soon. If you need any preparations with applications, then do check out our Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador Inspire Bangladesh group, which will be linked given, and you can also inbox us on our Bragg University Facebook page. So the Facebook page link will also be given, and we ambassadors will help you out. So all in all, this was the session regarding it. Today's session on Azure SQL Databases. I hope you have filled up the feedback forms and you have had a good time. So if anyone does not have any further questions, I would like to end the session over here. Fatiha, do you have to like add anything more? If so, then you can go on.
So there can be one thing that I can mention is when you join the MLSA program, you get to meet a bunch of industry specialists. You can directly reach out to them if you face any question, or you can build your models or stuffs with guidance. So that's it. I think that has been the most beneficial for me joining this program. So connections matters. That's it.
Yes, so if you want future events related to Microsoft technology, which we plan to come up with, then we would definitely post it, and please stay connected with our Facebook page and social media handles. So if you want to personally reach out to us, you can use LinkedIn. All you have to do is search with our name, and we will list our LinkedIn once we distribute the certificates. All the resources and all the other stuff will be provided. The chat box already has the MLSF Bracu uh, link, so you can check that out. And I would like to thank every single person who made time for this event today. And that would be all from us. That would be all from Fatiha and me. We really hope to see you soon, and we will be releasing the benefits.
What about the picture you mentioned?
Oh, yeah. So last but not the least, one thing that we would love to do is we would like to take a picture. So if you could kindly turn on your cameras and we could take a picture. So that would be really, really helpful. I will request everyone to please turn on their cameras. Yeah, it's okay. This picture won't go anywhere. So Fatiha, Mitul. That's great. I can see a lot of other people as well turning on their cameras, and it's fantastic. So let's just switch to gallery mode. The best part about Microsoft Teams is the gallery mode. Together mode. Fatiha, if you could please switch to the together. Oh yeah, okay, I got it. All right. So if anyone else would like to turn on their camera, now is the right time. Thank you. I can see a few participants, although I look short, but that would be okay. No issues. So yeah, if you could directly look into your camera, we'll just take a picture. All right, another one. Oh, we can see more faces over here. That's fantastic. It will be featured, so it's okay, Mr. Iftikhar. All right, so taking the picture in 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you so much, guys. We are done with the focus session. You can turn off your cameras, and thank you all for joining. Fatiha, Mitul, and I, we are thankful that you joined the session. So we will carry out future sessions, and as promised, we will distribute all our resources and whatever we covered today via email. So thank you. With that, I will be closing the session over here. Thank you. Most welcome. Most welcome.